how would an organization be affected, right, if they had a breach in an organization that has DaaS versus doesn't have DaaS? So this is a little bit of a loaded question, right? Because we're assuming that they had the breach regardless. And my knee-jerk reaction is to come back and I wish I could say that an organization that has DaaS would never have a breach, so we have nothing to worry about. But that's patently unrealistic, right? That would be us making just ridiculous claims that just have no veracity and no place in this conversation, right? Any organization can potentially be breached. Now, as I mentioned in other topics, I'm not a big proponent of selling the whole fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that approach to, why we do the things we do from a technology and solutions perspective. But I will say, statistically, right, if we implement a DaaS solution strategically in the right way, we can make an organization or help an organization to become increasingly less susceptible to a breach, because so many of the breaches that happen as a result of edge devices that are out there in the world in a semi-managed, or hopefully not, but more likely than not unmanaged state that are becoming an extension of our corporate or organizational network, that then have the ability to pass bad data, pass infections, pass malware, pass viruses, pass ransomware from those devices into our corporate network that then spreads. So if we can cut those ties to those physical devices, we've now eliminated all those things as threat vectors, right? So just by virtue of the fact that your desktop, your laptop, my desktop, those things are now no longer a part of the Evolve IP network, because we're just using those devices to get into a DaaS seat where we're actually doing our work that is managed, that is looked at on a continual basis with things like a remote monitoring and management antivirus solution. We are really locking that environment down to an extent that a breach becomes much less likely to occur. That said, as we talked about before, right, DaaS is itself not a security solution, but is used in conjunction with security solutions, but simplifies an organization's approach to security. So if a user somehow circumvents security measures that are in place to cause a breach, to cause ransomware, to cause malware, viruses, to manifest inside their DaaS seat, because of likely some failure to implement the right policies or layer in the right solutions to protect against that, it's still very possible that you could have an issue. You could have a breach, you could have data loss, you could have data compromisation. So the reality is, right, if your data is lost or compromised, that's going to affect your organization regardless of if you have DaaS or don't, right? If you had ransomware that spread within your environment, once that breach has happened, at that point, the damage is done. So if you're in a DaaS environment, if you're not in a DaaS environment, being in a DaaS environment might constitute a little bit of a faster recovery. And I say a little bit, probably being too generous there. A DaaS environment would likely lead to a much faster recovery of being able to get your users in and working. But if you had an issue where your data actually got breached, let's just say you had a file server that had a ransomware issue, that file server has the ransomware issue regardless of how your users are connecting into the environment. But what we do, right, is we might be able to help prevent that breach in the first place. Because Zach, let's assume for a moment, right, let's look at the old school way of working, right? You have a laptop, your laptop VPNs into Evolve, and you're doing your work there. Your laptop gets breached, you VPN into Evolve, likelihood is Evolve IP gets breached, right? So now in a DaaS environment, your laptop gets breached, you use your laptop to connect to DaaS, your laptop is isolated and segregated from the Evolve IP network. That breach only affects your laptop, never actually affects Evolve IP's corporate network or corporate data. So, a breach is a breach, and depending on where it occurs, the damage can certainly be contained or spread. But DaaS is not going to necessarily help an organization recover from a breach, but can certainly help an organization stem the potential for a breach to occur to their more critically protected infrastructure.